Can start, sir.
Yeah. Namaste. Welcome all to the 6-day international webinar on yoga, current trends and research conducted by the Department of Yogic Sciences and Holistic Health of Kavikula Guru Kalidas Sanskrit University, Ramtek, in association with Indic Academy as a part of Silver Jubilee celebrations of the university. Today is the fifth day, and we have two lectures. And the first lecture is of Smita madam, and her topic is Yoga, the evidence-informed mind-body medicine. So before I request Smita madam to start her lecture, I would like to give a small introduction of hers. Smita is a senior mind-body intervention specialist at the University of Texas, MD Anderson Cancer Center's Integrative Medicine Program. Smita is a yoga therapist by training, involved in yoga research. She has spent last decade at MD Anderson Cancer Center working with hundreds of cancer patients. On the research side, she is involved in developing and teaching yoga research interventions for different cancer populations like breast, lung, brain, and head and neck cancers. On the clinical side, she works alongside with other integrative medicine practitioners using yoga therapy with inpatient and outpatients going through cancer from diagnosis through end of life. She is the founding member and chair-elect of Yoga Special Interest Group at Society of Integrative Oncology, SIO. She has co-authored yoga publications and has presented her work at national and international conferences on the efficacy of yoga in cancer care. At SVIASA USA Houston Center, she is the program director and mentors many yoga therapists. So we welcome you, Smita madam, and I request you to kindly go ahead with your lecture.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you, Srinivasji, for that gracious introduction. I'll try to do justice to my topic today. As Srinivasji mentioned, my main area of work is in cancer. So today I'll be attempting an humble attempt to also present yoga as a mind-body science, and we'll also be sharing some of my own experiences working with cancer patients and how that relates to understanding yoga as a mind-body practice. So Srinivasji, just give me a thumbs up if you can see my slides, okay? You can see my slides.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. A quick outline of what I'll be attempting in the next 40 minutes or so, a quick understanding of mind-body medicine, evolution of how this mind-body medicine basically came about and its utility, yoga research in general, and yoga therapy across cancer care continuum, which is basically my field. So when we look in the media, there is a lot of attention these days, not only to yoga or to meditation practices, but in general, to these practices being referred as mind-body medicine. So you see topics like the science of meditation, how your mind can heal your body, special mind-body issue on happiness even, and then can prayer be a mind-body practice, and what are its healing effect benefits. So when we talk about mind-body practices, what are these practices or how do we understand these? These are basically a variety of techniques designed to enhance mind's capacity to affect bodily functions. And this definition is given by NIH and NCCIH, which is the Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. And when we talk about mind-body practices, another special understanding of these practices is that these practices are as old and aboriginal healing systems that come not only from the East, which is basically our understanding, and which majority of the practices originated here and probably traveled to the West, but also practices from Africa and even some practices from Native American medical systems are included within this broader definition. Continuing on mind-body approaches to healing, one of the basic understandings that again needs to be highlighted is our thoughts and feelings, which is the emotional, the mind part of it, and even the beliefs and attitudes basically affect not just certain bodily function, but every aspect of biological functioning. And again, this leads to the understanding that mind and body are in fact inseparable, And here we also can understand the top-down and bottom-up approach to mind-body as a medicine, where the top-down approaches of thoughts and what happens in the mind affecting the body, also practices like yoga meditation, which can be a bodily practice to begin with, can enhance mind's abilities to heal. So both these approaches, again, just keeping in mind. And when we talk about mind-body medicine as such and the evolution of this, because whenever we talk about medicine, we understand medicine as modern medicine, even though we have traditional systems of healing all around. Today, what is popular and being popularly used is the modern medicine. And the evolution of mind-body medicine basically started upon or was stumbled upon by physiologists and physicians from the West. So to name one of the important contributions was from Walter Cannon, who was a physiologist from Harvard. And his contribution was basically the understanding of homeostasis. Whenever organisms, animals, or humans were not at their core balance, what we call as samatva, state of balance, the equilibrium was disturbed and the homeostasis was disturbed by the body. So to study this, he studied the autonomic nervous system and its branching out towards the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. And also he named the fight and flight response, which we popularly use today to understand stress and the stress mechanisms at the body level. Continued again was another physician, Seeley, who defined stress, who understood stress, which was based on the understanding of the autonomic nervous system and its branching. And he defined stress as the non-specific response of the body to any demand. And here he responded as fight and flight, where if an organism is threatened with the stress, the organism can fight back, or flight. And also there is a third response, what we call as freeze. And this understanding of fight, flight, freeze response formed the physiological basis, psychological basis for the trauma work, which is very, 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 very popular today. And through the trauma work, more psychologists are trying to understand the healing and the basis of continuing the mind-body medicine as a larger field. And also the trauma basically is inability to fight or flight. So whenever an organism is stuck, whenever there is a stress that is produced and you cannot fight the stress, neither can you flight from the stress, and being stuck in this hostile situation gives rise to what we call as trauma. And the post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is a very popular term as well. And today we understand that trauma actually is a higher risk for many diseases and physiological and psychological changes in the body. Continued again contribution of many different scientists like Solomon Bird, Snyder, Adder, and others who contributed for the development and understanding of psychoneuroimmunology. So their work basically contributed to how stress impacts mind, thereby impacting immune system. And Adder basically named the field as psychoneuroimmunology. Again, a very popular field where yoga can be applied in a great deal. And coming to the last parts of, the clarity of mind-body medicine, Herbert Benson is now considered as the father of modern mind-body medicine. He was a cardiologist at Harvard Medical School who actually studied Buddhist monks in depth. And he was awed to see that these monks who were practicing meditation were able to alter the physiological function of the body to great deal. And he coined relaxation response. He coined the term relaxation response as actually an alternate to meditation. He was also the first physician to bring spirituality and healing into medicine. And today in the modern medicine, if you see this great deal of development in understanding mind-body medicine, the track that we just looked upon in the last few slides becomes important. And today, Benson Henry Institute for Mind-Body Medicine at Harvard is a very prestigious place where medical doctors go to get their MDs in mind-body medicine and continue the field further. When we talk about mind-body medicine, stress and mind-body connection is basically what the entire contribution of mind-body medicine from the modern medical perspective has been. So in here, the autonomic nervous system, whenever the organism is threatened or is exposed to a stressful situation, there is an entire deal of sympathetic arousal to fight or flight, where dilates, dilates pupils so you can see better, your heart rate increases, your breathing rate increases, your circulation increases, giving you every ability to fight the stress that your body is facing. So think, because stress has been an evolutionary response forever, think of you as a person who is stuck with a tiger in a jungle, and you need all this response of your body so that your body can save itself. Another important part of the autonomic nervous system is after the system has been responded, exposed to sympathetic arousal, the parasympathetic response, where we call it as rest and digest, is also important, where the body comes back to its homeostasis, its normal state. So when the person or when the stress response is continuous and the person cannot regain the balance, that is when a lot of stress-related imbalances begin to settle down in the body. So what are the risk factors when a person is exposed to stress? There is what we call as acute and chronic changes that happens in the body. So the acute response to stress, and to give you an example of what is an acute response, is if you are facing a test or an interview, or if you're preparing for a presentation and your system is stressed about the upcoming presentation, which can last about a few hours maybe, or even a day, this is considered an acute response. And this simple acute response or exposure to stress can actually increase your body's ability to get a cold or a fever, because even an acute stress response minimizes or suppresses your immune system. And when your body is getting exposed to what we call as chronic stress, this can be job-related stress, this can be a marriage-related stress, or this can be stress of caregiving for someone, where every morning when you wake up, you go through the entire stress process, and this is considered as chronic stress. So this stress just becomes a high risk factor for many bodily changes. And also another area is trauma. In a minute, I'll just elaborate on it, as well as adverse childhood events and other lifestyle related factors also increase your body's ability to get diseases. And today, in the name of psychosomatic diseases or even autoimmune diseases, psychosomatic is diseases that are caused by the mind that impacts bodily function. Autoimmune diseases are your body's own immune system attacking body's own parts. And this can be, cancer is a great example for autoimmune disease. Arthritis can be a great example. And there are so many more autoimmune diseases that are happening. And also NCDs or non-communicable diseases. These are all the buzzwords in the field of integrated medicine or mind-body medicine that is gaining traction. When we talk about trauma and its effects on the body, post-traumatic stress disorder, some examples for trauma or natural disasters such as tsunami, flood, or hurricane, where people are completely displaced without home, or other forms of trauma can be sexual assault, physical assault that has happened, or witnessing something very terrible like shooting or stabbing of a person, or even loss of a loved one can be traumatic. And again, there needs to be a formal process of actually recovery or treatment for these functions, for these kind of exposures. And adverse childhood events, what we call as ACEs. This again has gained a lot of importance in how, if children under the age of 18 are exposed to adverse childhood events, and these can be physical, verbal, sexual abuse, or even physical and emotional neglect, or illness, death, parental separation, like parents getting divorced, violence, witnessing violence at younger age. All these basically increases the chance of these children getting diseases at an adult age or older age, again, because of the entire physiological, psychological changes that can happen. And the thing with trauma or adverse childhood events are these can be relived. So these events can be thought upon, and children can think about this even when they are grown adults. And this can continue to stimulate the physiological responses from the brain to cause diseases at the body level. Let's look at stress and cancer. So we think that stress can cause various changes in the body, and stress can lead to diseases like cardiovascular diseases, cardiopulmonary functions, like asthma, hypertension, or even acute reactions like GI symptoms. It can be IBS, gastritis, acidity, and others. But can stress cause cancer? For the longest time, and even today, probably a lot of oncologists can disagree that stress and cancer has no connection. And there are certain cancers that are not related to stress that can be virus related, like HPV and others. But stress, chronic stress, can actually make our bodies more hospitable to cancer growth. What does that mean? A continuous change in your immune system can actually make your body more susceptible to developing certain types of cancers. This can happen because of certain genetic mutations. And the sympathetic nervous system regulation of the tumor microenvironment. Say, for example, there are two identical patients who have a similar cancer. They're of similar age and their circumstances are similar, like their family, background is similar, the kind of job that they do is similar. But if one of the patient that is having cancer get exposed to stress more, that sympathetic nervous system regulation can actually change the tumor's microenvironment, which means the ability of the tumor to grow. Can the cancer tumor grow faster? And can it metastasize within the body? So today we have evidence to see all this and how the stress can actually dictate the cancer's growth. Cancer can also directly promote cancer progression through different neuroendocrine pathways in the body. Again, stress and cancer. Can stress cause cancer? Stress can actually decrease immune functioning. And when there is decreased immune functioning with natural killer cells and others, it can actually impair the body's ability to effectively repair DNA. And if you know about cancer and how cancer is caused by certain genetic mutations where within the DNA, a gene can mutate and it can escape the entire process of cell death, and that can lead to a cell that did not die or that did not reach the apoptosis, and its continuous multiplication can actually continue the tumor growth within the body, and the cancer can grow and spread in the body. Stress and cancer. Stress not just causes or changes the cancer's microenvironment, but it can also negatively impact quality of life. So we see that stress, people who are stressed, and this can be all our experiences. We have all experienced stress at some point or the other in life. And when we are experienced or exposed to stress, we see that our ability to take care of our health decreases. So this can be having a lack of motivation to eat healthy food or a lack of motivation to exercise correctly. So if you're tired and had a long day and you're not balanced, by the end of the day, your ability to do 1 hour of yoga or to go for a walk is extremely low. And we see people who are stressed more have actually very less motivation to be healthy. And this can actually disrupt the health cycle, and people can have more health issues. Stress actually can also decrease the efficacy of chemotherapy. So take a moment here and try to focus on what I'm trying to share here. When people are faced with cancer, there are treatments to cure cancer or to manage cancer. So these treatments can be chemotherapy, radiation, and others, and these are extremely expensive, tedious, and very life-threatening treatments itself. There are actually literature to support that certain patients can actually die from the side effects of cancer treatments itself. So when a person is undergoing chemotherapy for their cancer, and add to that the stress, and this actually can decrease the efficacy of chemotherapy, which means how the person's body is responding to chemotherapy. Can they fight cancer actually is dictated by or altered by the exposure of the person to stress. So chronic stress can also lead to telomere attrition. So this again in cancer, we see DNA And the length of telomere within the DNA dictates the longevity, the health of the person. And telomere attrition is related to shorter lifespan or quicker death. Emotional response to cancer can also influence both morbidity and the mortality in cancer patients. So basically, there is a lot of evidence to show the stress and how stress can impact cancer-related treatment, outcomes, and the lifespan of the patients who are going through cancer. Switching gears now to what are some of the examples of mind-body medicine. So far, we saw mind-body medicine. We also saw stress and how it alters the mind-body functioning through physiological and psychological pathways. Now let's look at what are some of the different examples of mind-body practices, mind-body medicine. Yoga, which is what we are discussing today, is on top of my list. Meditation. Again, I've placed them separately because there is a large Western understanding as yoga and meditation as separate practices, but I'm presenting it with the understanding that through the Indian system of yoga, which is Patanjala-based yoga and other Vedic understanding of yoga through Upanishads and other Shastras, we understand yoga and meditation as one practice. Other examples of mind-body medicine continues to be things like hypnosis, guided imagery, breathing techniques. Again, these can be breathing techniques of pranayama that comes from the sources of yoga, or these can be other breathing techniques that are becoming popular in the West that can be non-pranayama techniques. Relaxation techniques, this can be yoga nidra, this can be other guided relaxation techniques that are there. Tai Chi Qigong, these are Asian, Chinese-based mind-body practices or movement-based mind-body practices. Music therapy itself is also a mind-body practice. There is again Western music therapy and also Indian-based music therapy with certain classical ragas and others that are explored. Acupuncture can be also considered mind-body practice and many others. And trust me, this is not an exhaustive list. The list can be twice or thrice as long as you can. And it is reaching a state where anything that affects mind-body functions can be, under this broader term of mind-body medicine. And when we look at mind-body medicine, where does this exactly fall under? So anything that is not allopathy or modern medicine based are basically grouped under complementary health approaches. And these days it is getting popular as integrative health approaches. So complementary is, complementing the actual modern medicine. Integrative health approaches are something that is integrated along with the modern medicine. So these can be dietary supplements, vitamins, minerals, probiotics, mind-body practices, and you can see actually the list is long for mind-body practices and other complementary and health approaches, which can be homeopathy, naturopathy, siddha, Ayurveda, and other examples. And let's just take a moment to understand the use of complementary health approaches in the United States. And these are the 10 top most complementary health approaches that are there among adults. And this was a survey 10 years ago. We are waiting for the next survey, which is due to release probably this or next year. And you can see that 1/3 of the approaches that are used are basically mind-body approaches. So you can see practices like deep breathing, Tai Chi, Yoga, Qigong. You can see meditation and progressive muscle relaxation, guided imagery, and others, which contributes to about 1/3 of the mind-body approaches that is used in the larger complementary health approaches that are used throughout for various diseases within the US. And then the mind-body medicine utility. So this chart basically gives you an idea of mind-body medical therapies with a national survey that was conducted. And you can see it across different diseases, anywhere from anxiety, depression, chronic pain, which is a very popular area because pain management is becoming much complicated in how pain is managed, because even the best of the medicines, is sometimes unable to give the management for pain. And in United States, we have a whole epidemic of drug abuse going on because of pain management. And you also see diseases like arthritis, insomnia, all the way to, weight, which is obesity, and diabetes mellitus. And you can see the percentage of people who used mind-body medicine in the last year, and these are all self-reported from the patients. And these are all the people who found it to be useful. And this is the national estimates. So more and more people are, more and more patients are themselves approaching mind-body medicine, because mind-body medicine is still not the standard at all medical centers, especially within the modern medicine. A very handful of such centers have integrative medicine centers, or even mind-body medicine centers as such. So even without the actual integration, we see more patients reaching out for utility of mind-body medicines as such. And I thought the aspirants and supporters of yoga would appreciate that even though there are so many different mind-body practices, and within the mind-body, movement-based mind-body practices, you see that there is a significant growth in the utility of mind-body medicine, especially yoga, when you compare it with Tai Chi or Qigong. And this is true for America. We also try to see the ethnic differences, the age differences, where a lot of people think yoga is popular just among youngsters, like people within the age range of 20 to 40, which is not true. Yoga continues to be popular and popular as a safe practice, even for senior or elderly populations, and even for underserved population in United States, like African Americans or Hispanic populations. So now coming back to yoga as a mind-body practice. And again, I think in this series of lectures, eminent scholars have been presenting about yoga and its different facets. And I'm not going to be preaching to the choir again. So yoga as a mind-body practice, one of the important takeaways that really strikes to me personally is the yoga definition, yogic definition from Yoga Vashista, which is mana prashamanobhaya yogaha iti vidhiyate, where when we understand stress as speed, anytime there is a stress arousal in the sympathetic activation of the autonomic nervous system, it is speed, it is uncontrolled speed. So yoga understands stress as speed, and if that is correct, then slowing down basically is the solution to the stress. So equanimity or prashamana of the stress is what yoga brings to the understanding, and that is how yoga has become a popular mind-body practice. So again, we have the contribution of Panchakosha Viveka, where we understand an individual self at the Panchakosha, Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. And within this understanding, we have the understanding of Vyadhi, where Adija Vyadhi is of two types, Adija and Anadija. And even though modern medicine has understanding the mind-body medicine in the last 100 years or so, or maybe 150 years or so, and they're still struggling to understand the entirety of what mind-body medicine can be, our rishis thousands of years ago have given, as have explored this concept to the last pin and nail that one can. And we understand that the modern stress-related diseases starts at mind. And this is why mind-body medicine is required for the modern challenges of the modern man. And even though we have a long way to go, we have a great start with the yoga research that is there. And whenever we try to look at yoga research, it is not one area that we can look at. It is not just the one word yoga that we can search, because yoga, the understanding of yoga and principles and the science, the knowledge depth of yoga has influenced. And as it has gone from east to west, we see that the research has been split into many different parts. So we see that there are research studies or research understanding of physical practices or postures itself. Things like what can 5 minutes of Shirsasana, what are the physiological changes that are happening when a person does, practices like Shirsasana. Breath work, what is the effects of Kapalabhati on your brain functioning, Kapalabhati on oxygen saturation in your blood, and meditation related practices. So practices like MBSR, mindfulness-based meditation practice, or even practices like Om meditation, or practices that are imparted by modern yogis like Mahesh Mahesh Yogi and others. And a combination of this work is what encompasses the work, the wider work of mind-body medicine or yoga. When we talk about yoga research, the slide credit is to Dr. Naveen Vishweshwaraya from SVASA. A beautiful slide. When we talk about yoga research, experiments are something that we are trying to quantify. A lot of experiments is what is trying to quantify what is happening at a physiological level, what is happening at a heart rate level. But what we really still cannot quantify is the experience of the individual, which actually is much greater. So every time we publish yoga research and work with patients, we capture certain things, but there is so much more that is uncaptured or unattended still, or understood, not fully understood, because we still don't have scientific tools to measure this wonderful science. So moving to when we understand yoga as a wonderful science, as a wonderful mind-body medicine, what is a theoretical model? What happens basically? And this model is basically available for general understanding of yoga mind-body practices, which encompasses all pranayama practices or asanas and meditation. But this theoretical model is specifically for cancer-related treatment toxicities. So when a person is given or exposed to practices of yoga, like asana meditation, and what are different pathways that are changed? It can be the HPA axis, or it can be the circadian rhythm function that changes, or circulatory and lymphatic systems that are changed. So these are some of the symptoms that cancer patients go through, which can be sleep disruption, cancer-related fatigue, cognitive impairment, psychological distress, a lot of musculoskeletal symptoms that are there, which are so significant that many cancer patients have to be on medication for lifetime for this. So when such people are introduced through yoga, yoga helps retain balance, what we call as bringing a person to his or her own nature. So we call yoga as homecoming. So yoga can bring balance back and regain the homeostasis, thereby restoring the function of cardiac circadian functioning, which is basically what is related to the day and night cycle, the sunrise sunset cycle. It also decreases the diurnal cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that is released by the body to regulate stress. Other physical functioning like cardiopulmonary functioning, muscular functioning can be enhanced. And then it also reduces pro-inflammatory cytokines, and it improves anti-inflammatory actions and decreases other inflammatory markers. Cancer is again understood as inflammatory diseases, and doing yoga we have seen, and this is based on not just a theoretical model of an idea, but this is also based on the research that we already have within the field for yoga and cancer. When I talk about yoga and cancer, a lot of people ask me this question: when should I do yoga? Is yoga beneficial, after I've done my cancer treatment? The answer to that is yoga can be given at any point within the cancer care continuum. And here I also talk about cancer prevention. If a person can do regularly yoga practices, not just dedicating some time for physical postures, but really giving yourself the permission to have that evolution of let go, to really release the stress, to develop that nature of yoga as a second nature, to be in the state of equilibrium, samatvam yoga uchyate, which is what Sri Krishna says. So if a person can live a lifestyle of that, then yoga can be considered cancer prevention. Yoga can be considered actually a prevention for any and all kind of diseases. From there, yoga can be applied anywhere from diagnosis to end of life. When cancer patients are diagnosed with cancer, there is fear, anger, stress. And before beginning treatment, we call this as a potential prehab treatment, where a patient who is exposed to yoga practices can become stronger physically, mentally, emotionally, and can respond to the cancer treatment better. So we also see survivorship and end of life. Even when a person is at the state of end of life, pain management and support can be provided by yoga, which is of great value to cancer patients throughout the diagnosis. So with this model in mind, I would like to quickly present maybe one or two studies, since there is a research interest and focus, I was told when I was approached for this. So this is a randomized controlled trial, which I was very lucky to be part of, where we introduced mindfulness meditation for women undergoing stereostatic breast biopsy. So for those of you who are unfamiliar or not very familiar with what this is, when there is a doubt that somebody is having breast cancer, they have to go through a procedure called as biopsy, where a sample of the tumor from the breast is taken and examined to actually know what type of cancer it is, and know the pathology of the cancer to decide the treatment forward. So this is a very stressful procedure and can create a lot of anxiety, pain, and the healing time from the biopsy itself can be challenging. So this is a time where most patients don't have any support other than going to the doctor and the technician performing this and waiting for the results. So we designed a study where we designed a study with 3 arms, where one arm was randomized to guided meditation, the other arm was randomized to focused breathing, and another arm was standard of care, where patients would come, get the biopsy, and go. So the biopsy duration can be anywhere from about 20 minutes to about an hour, and average is about 30 to 40 minutes of biopsy. So women who actually got into the meditation arm and the focused breathing arm basically reported benefits from actually going through this procedure with meditation or guided breathing. So when the women are going through this treatment, a meditation expert and or a yoga expert, just like myself, would stay with the patient and would be helping them to guide. Focus on what I'm trying to tell you, focus on your breathing, focus on this part of the meditation. So someone would give them live instructions with the patient as they went through this kind of biopsy. And women basically also reported more comfortable procedure and recovering from the procedure very quickly. Women in the guided meditation group reported a steeper reduction in anxiety than the focused breathing or the standard of care group. And also women experienced increased beta activity. We also performed what we call as EEG, electrocardiogram, which is mapping of the brain when women were going through this. And we could also see that there's change in the brain functioning if the patients are actually exposed to these. So conclusions, brief guided meditation may actually improve effective anxiety relief during an acute medical procedure and affect neuronal activity in the regions associated with attention and self-awareness in the brain. So why this can be important? There are a lot of patients who are so scared to even get treatments of cancer. This can be radiation treatment, this can be biopsy and such. So such short duration, even though it is not 10 weeks of yoga, 5 weeks of yoga, I'm talking about just about 15 to 20 minutes of small meditation practice that is guided to a patient can also have great results. And this is another study that, again, I was part of, where we conducted a 3-arm trial, and this was between the collaboration of MD Anderson Cancer Center and SVASA here at Bangalore, which is one of the premier yoga research institutions to the world, and it has some really neat collaborations with some great institutions across the globe, and it has activities in about 36 different countries. So this study was a collaborative study between the 2 organizations, where we had a combination of breathing, postures, deep relaxation, pranayama, and meditation as a program that was given to these patients. So we measured health status, sleep data, fatigue, benefit findings, spirituality, depression, and other outcomes. We also objectively measured cortisol rhythmicity. This was taken from a saliva sample because the cortisol hormone, which is a stress hormone, is basically released throughout the day from early morning to afternoon or mid-afternoon. And we also measured heart rate variability within these patients. And in the interest of time, I'm quickly moving the results. We saw that yoga arm, which is this red arm that you see, red line that you see, actually benefited more than the stretch or the control arm. So this was a 3-arm trial. One arm was standard of care, the other arm did stretching, and the final arm did basically yoga. And you can see that yoga group benefiting more throughout the cancer treatment. This is actually at the end, at the beginning of the treatment. This is about 2 weeks into the treatment. This is about 1.5 months into the treatment. And the last one was post-treatment, which is about 3 months after treatment. And you see that yoga arm not only improved, but sustained the changes even at the later time points. Here also you see this is for general health questionnaire. You see a great deal of change that is happening. And when you see this part of the time point, you see all other groups getting really worse than the baseline, and the effect in the yoga arm becoming a little less. This could be because once patients finish the yoga classes, the adherence to treatment, which is maintaining what they have learned in the classes and doing yoga regularly, is still a challenge across all clinical studies in all different populations. But if patients continued their yoga practice, they are bound to see benefits. And this is a measure what we call as benefit finding, where after cancer patients are exposed to cancer, a lot of patients or any kind of trauma for that matter, if patients can make meaning out of, oh, because after I got cancer, I know the value of my life more, I will be more healthy. Or many patients talk about, because I got cancer, I rechanged or I restructured my life. I don't stress too much. I give importance to family. I stress about work less. So these are some things that people change, and these are all encompassed under what we call as benefit finding. So the benefit finding in other groups was definitely much lesser, and yoga group found that benefit finding was a major outcome for this group. Another important aspect of benefit finding is cancer patients who feel and who relate to benefit finding after their cancer treatment also are known to live longer. So this we are talking about the longevity of the cancer patients after yoga treatment. And then coming to cortisol, as I mentioned, cortisol is a stress hormone that is released. And with cortisol, the steeper the slope, the better it is for the longevity. And this at the baseline, we see that yoga had the least steep, but at the end of treatment, patients in the yoga arm had the steepest curve. The height even increased, as well as the depth of the curve increased, which again, literature points to patients with steep curve having better longevity, which means it regulates their immune system better, and patients are at better chances to stay healthy and live longer if they did yoga continuously. One more follow-up. In the interest of time, I would like to a couple minutes at least for question answers. So a lot of evidence that has been collected within the cancer and understanding yoga as a mind-body medicine and applied in cancer has led to what we call as guidelines. So National Comprehensive Cancer Network Clinical Practice Guidelines. This institution, NCCN, basically releases guidelines of different mind-body practices, different complementary practices, and it recommends what cancer patients should be practicing. And in its summary, you see there are different mind-body practices like acupuncture, massage, meditation, MBSR, yoga, music therapy. Exercise and nutrition may not be directly mind-body medicines, but at least these are. And you see, yoga basically is one of the consistent, most popular practices that is giving effect or that is giving relief to the cancer-related symptoms that cancer patients face. So this again, for yoga aspirants and students of yoga, it's a great promise to continue to study yoga as a mind-body medicine, to explore more, to understand the field more. So I would like to actually conclude with some acknowledgements to my university, which is University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center, where most of the work that I've presented today is the work and research that I do there, and also Vyasa Yoga University, which is my home university, thanks to my teachers, mentors, and gurus. And most importantly, a lot of cancer patients who have actually given the experience to really teach them, work with them, and understand yoga as mind-body medicine. And very quickly, as I sum up this, I would like to also share the effects of yoga is so popular that we see a mind-body clinic that I have established at the Cancer Center, where we have inpatient and outpatient yoga therapy applicable or available. So this is just like you walking into modern medicine doctor's office and asking for, I have fever, what would be, medicine for me? Cancer patients actually coming to this mind-body clinics to get practices like pranayama or asana or yoga nidra to actually manage their symptoms. So with that, I know I just have about 5 minutes left, maybe Srinivasji, if there are any comments or questions, I would like to take.
So I request the participants, if they have any questions, kindly share in the chat box or raise your hand so that you can ask question. So I was just, having this in my mind while you were talking about mind-body thing. Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandhamokshayo. So, and even the concept of Sukshma Sharira and Sthula Sharira from the Vedantic perspective, which is the mind is the main aspect. We do have three Shariras, that is the Sthula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, and the Karana Sharira. So the Sukshma Sharira, the main ingredient of the Sukshma Sharira would be the mind. And based on the mind, the Indriyas will work. And based on these two, the Sthula Sharira will be, the reflections of these two will be having seen evidently on the Sthula Sharira. So in that way, your talk was really, really informative. And even from the research perspective, we do have one of our student who is who's actually doing what you call her research is on the breast cancer and related techniques for from the perspective of yoga. So hope your talk would help them in that way. I don't think many people have questions, and someone is asking your, fine.
Yeah, Srinivas, true. Absolutely what you mentioned about the Sthula Sukshma Shariras. The understanding of yogic perspective is so deep. And that is why I know you have wonderful scholars, and even the scholar like yourself who have been presenting. So I took less light upon that and tried to, understand the evolution of mind-body medicine, which in the modern medicine is at its very baby stages. We still are modern medical doctors and scientists are still, grappling to understand where it is, what it is in the last 100 years. But the contribution of our sages and our shastras is just unparalleled. What we need to know is just understand it properly for the modern people from the modern,
to talk in the contemporary language is what is the need of the day.
Absolutely.
And really, thank you for your wonderful, lecture. So.
Thank you, Srinivasji, and the organizers for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you very much, madam. So we'll be continuing with the next lecture on archaeology and history of Hatha Yoga, new research and challenges by Dr. Vijay Sarde and Manish Maheshwari ji. So I request Manish ji and Vijay ji to kindly, So before I request the speakers, I would like to just give a small introduction of the both. Vijay Sardeji received his PhD from the Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology at the Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute in Pune on archaeological investigations of the Natha Sampradaya in Maharashtra. He is presently working as an independent researcher in the field of archaeology and history and holds life memberships of the Indian History and Culture Society, New Delhi, the Indian Archaeological Society, New Delhi, and the Society of South Asian Archaeology, Pune. He has participated in the early historic and medieval excavations at Junnar, Shiur, and Loni Kalbhor in Maharashtra. A book titled Maharashtra Ka Dharmik Paryatan and 18 research papers have been published in various national and international journals. Coming to Mr. Manish Maheshwari. Manish is an independent researcher with a focus on yoga and Shiva traditions of pre-modern India. He also runs a foundation for the promotion and preservation of heritage, culture, and manuscript traditions of India. He is a scholar in residence at Indic Academy. Manish holds postgraduate degrees from Columbia University and Mumbai University. I once again welcome the speakers, and I request you to kindly start your lecture.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for a nice introduction. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
And can you see
Vijay
my
ji, you
PPT?
might want to increase the slide, the slide, make it full.
Okay. Let me check.
Maybe it's in the projector mode, I suppose.
Yeah, I think, okay. Yes, now can you see properly?
It is
Still.
it is the same thing. I mean, is your system connected to any projector?
Not it means.
Okay.
It is like I can you can see. We are not able to see.
We are able to see, but not in a full screen mode.
I think you can use the display settings and swap it. And just click on the display settings.
Yes, and then slideshow. Sir, okay.
Swap presenter view and
okay. One second. Now.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's perfect. Yeah.
Now it is okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So good evening, all of you. I am Vijay Sarde, and I am thankful to Kavi Kunguru Kalidas Sanskrit University, Ramtek, and Indic Academy for inviting us for this international webinar on yoga, current trends, and research. Today, I, along with Manish Maheshwari, are going to talk on the archaeology and history of Hatha Yoga. So in the first half an hour, I am going to discuss recent archaeological research on Hatha Yoga, especially in Western India. Later, Manish Maheshwari, he will discuss on further history and also challenges of Hatha Yoga related research. So, well, I am starting my presentation with the quotation of eminent scholar Jason Birch. It is based on a study of different yoga texts. He concludes that there are very few asanas mentioned in early Hatha Yoga texts dating from the 12th to 15th century, and it was only in the post-16th century period that there was a substantial increase, while the number of 84 asanas was attained after the 17th century. But the archaeological evidences says a different story, because we have various representations of different asanas and other yogic practices on various temples of India right from 11th century to 15th century, and most of the practices did not identify it. Therefore, it seems that there were many asanas already developed before 15th century CE. We will see these practices in upcoming slides. As we know, research in the field of Hatha Yoga has increased rapidly, at least in the last 2 decades in archaeological field. Various scholars from different parts of the world has giving their immense contributions in the field of Hatha Yoga. We have sufficient research on its textual aspects. However, very limited work has been done in the archaeological field. Both the fields have some limitations and advantages as well. However, archaeological findings related to Hatha Yoga are extremely significant to understanding the condition of Hatha Yoga in the past. We have also depictions of different types of Hatha Yoga, Hatha Yogic practices, which are not found in any known texts on Hatha Yoga. Some of the early archaeological records are helpful to understand the early development of Hatha Yoga in a particular period and region. Presently, some earliest examples of complicated yoga postures, just like pranayama and the bandhas, in both texts and archaeology. While some early text mentions asanas such as Kukutasana and Mayurasana. However, we found the earliest mention of some of the asanas depicted on various temples in much later texts. For example, the first textual identification of posture similar to the Urdhva Dhanurasana, upward bow posture. In the Brahmanata temple is from the 18th century Hatabhyas Paddhati, which describes a posture called Parenkasana, Sofa posture. That is similar to Urdhva Dhanurasana. Similar, the Dvipada Shirasana, which seems to be one of the most common yogic sculpture, appears in our textual records in the 17th century Hatha Ratnavali, which describes a posture called Phanindrasana, Lord of Snake posture. That is similar to Dvipada Shirasana. In my doctoral studies, I came across such early evidence of Hatha Yoga in Western India. Still date, these are the oldest known archaeological records on Hatha Yoga all over India. Thus, we can understand the importance of archaeological sources in the research on Hatha Yoga. So, first, I will shortly introduce a few recent research in this field. So far, very little research has been done on the archaeological perspectives, evidences for yogic practices. Among few notable efforts, myself, I have attempted to analyze the postures and other aspects of Nath Yogis and Siddhas from the archaeological point of view in Western India, including Parunde in Maharashtra and Daboi in Gujarat. In South India, efforts to collect some archaeological evidence related to Hatha Yoga were also made. Paramount among these are Lindrothe, 2006, and Richard Shaw, Ejil Raman. However, the archaeological evidence in South India are from the 15th century onward. While the archaeological records in Western India dates back to the 12th century CE. Even the early textual production of Hatha Yogic text is in Western India before prominent texts were written from the 15th century onwards from the Shiva centers of South India. All these is overwhelming evidence that Maharashtra is where more physical forms of yoga were systematized the earliest. So how we can see how Maharashtra is very flourish and various iconographical evidences are available in Maharashtra, we will going to see. So we see sculptures of Shiva Acharyas and Shiva ascetics in Tapas, but nothing of the variety of seated yogic postures and the sophisticated iconography of the ascetics found in the temples of the 10th and 11th centuries. In these temples, the figures of Shiva Acharya and Rajguru are present, but the yogic iconography program is missing. You can see here some images in Tapas. These all are images, except these images are from Gujarat, and this is from Maharashtra, Daite Sudan temple in Lonar. So in 10th and 11th century, you can see this type of scenario in the field of yoga. Next, then after this 10th and 11th century, there is a complete change of scenery when we look at the temples of Yadava ruling region from the late 11th century onwards in Maharashtra. and the northern Karnataka region. In one of the earliest example of the Gondeshwar temple, Sinnar, we see images of swaying siddhas and yogis, the iconography, which becomes popular in the 15th century Vijayanagara dynasty. So you can see this sculpture is from Gondeshwar temple, and it is depicted on one of the pillars of temple. And here you can see the swaying yogi and siddhas. We can see such examples also are in Sadgaon Bhusari in central Maharashtra, and another example is from Sinnar only. So Sinnar, in another early temple, Ayeshwara temple, we find an image of ascetics in an asana that looks very similar to Vrichikasana, scorpion pose. You can see here. This looking like as a Bharvahaka, a load bearer of temple, but it's also seems like a Vrichikasana, scorpion pose. Now, from the 12th century temples such as the Mankeshwar temple at Zhodge, Bhuleshwar temple at Malshiras, Nagnath temple at Aundha, we find sculptures of Nath yogis and comparatively a large number of yogis and ascetics imagery. Similarly, the 13th century temples such as Brahmanatha temple at Parunde and Jogeshwar temple at Devlane have multiple imageries of ascetics practicing yogic asanas, bandhas and pranayamas, that is Kumbhaka. We can see the locations of these temples in the map of Maharashtra. So these are the main temples where we can find more iconographic representations of yogic postures. Here, Mankeshwar temple. Mankeshwar temple is in Jhodge. I will show you. Here. Just a minute. Here. Malegaon, near Malegaon, Mankeshwar temple, Jhodge. Then Bhuleshwar is in Pune district. Then Brahmanatha temple, Parunde is in also Pune district. Here, the location of exact location of that temple. Then Mahuri Gate. Mahuri Gate actually it is in Gujarat, in Vadodara district, but it is very near from Maharashtra. You can locate this place here. For this side in Vadodara is very near from this place. Then Sangdev temple, it is in Jalgaon, and then Someshwar temple, Pimpri Dhumala, it is in Pune district. So we can also observe that all these early temples had Hatha Yoga practices concentrated in the north and western region of present Maharashtra. Most of the temples are dedicated to Shiva. So we have to means this area, especially this Nasik, Dhule, Jalgaon district, Aurangabad district, and famous Ellora caves are located here. So, and we can see the among five Jyotirlinga, true means Trambakeshwar, then Bhima Shankar, Aunda Nagnath, and Krishneshwar. These Shiva centers also located in this region. So we can see this region is full of Shiva centers and Hatha yogic practices. So the practice of Hatha Yoga, there are several descriptions of the techniques are given in various medieval and modern texts. These techniques are used for cleansing the body to prepare it for the practice of yoga. We have some sculptures showing some of the cleaning techniques on the temple at Parunde. So yeah, you know that this Dhauti, Bhasti, Neti, Tratak, Nauli, Kapal Bhati, Gajkarni, Chakri, these are the cleaning techniques, Shuddhi Kriyas. So some of the Shuddhi Kriyas we can find on different temples in Maharashtra. So look at this image. You will find something is going here. So I will explain. This technique is used for cleaning the nasal passages. Here, Neti Kriya. You can see here Neti Kriya like image. And yogi practitioner is doing something. So in this technique, sadhaka uses a cotton thread into the nostril and pulls it out of the mouth. Then another sculpture, it is looks like Gajakarni. Clean the stomach by drinking water and then regurgitating it. Means देखिए कि किस प्रकार से यहाँ पर साधक क्या है कि अपने जो है जीवा पर जो है मतलब वोमिटिंग जो करता है ना, उस प्रकार का दृश्य यहाँ पर आपको दिखाई देगा. These are some earliest examples of Shatkarmani, both in textual and archaeological sources. This, for example, this Netikriya appears for the first time in the 15th century Hat Pradipika text, in Hat Pradipika text. But however, the imagery is quite older than the text, that is in 13th century CE. So this culture is from dated back to 13th century. And we have earliest examples of such practices in 15th century. So we can understand how archaeological evidences are more important in this study. So now asanas. This is a very important part in yoga, actually. In the Hat Pradipika, asanas are said to lead to steadiness, health, and suppleness. Certain individual asanas are said to awaken Kundalini, destroy disease, make the breath enter the central channel, and increase the digestive fire. We have many sculptural evidences of complicated physical postures depicted on various temples. So let's see. Here, this temple, you can see this temple, Mankeshwar temple from Jhodge. These yoga postures are depicted on the Mankeshwar temple. So these are from Mankeshwar temple in Nasik district. The temple is dated back to 12th century and dedicated to Shiva. These various yoga asanas are carved on the upper portion of the Janga. See here, the upper portion of Janga. This portion is called as Janga portion. So all around this the temple, there are tiny images of yogic postures have been carved. Here in this slide, you can see the various asanas such as Brahmasana, Phanindrasana, or Nagfanasana, and Nagfanasana. Some scholars call this this as a Pashini Mudra. Then Vajrasana, you can see here Vajrasana, and then Kukutasana. This is like a Kukutasana. And several asanas given in the early text of Hatha Yoga are depicted in this temple. Kukutasana is also mentioned in Hat Pradipika. The 13th century Machendra Samhita has also referred to as Kukutasana. Now, this another important temple is Bhuleshwar. It is in Pune district and around 50 kilometers from Pune city. Some yogis are shown in different asanas and mudras in this temple. And we can see yogis with kamandalu, staff, and in various postures. The costumes of or textures of these yogis are similar to the Nath yogis found elsewhere in Deccan, from which it can be assumed that these images are related to the Siddhas or yogis of the Nath tradition. We can see here yogi in Dvipada Shirasana or in Pashini Mudra. Here we can see this posture is called Dvipada Shirasana and Pashini Mudra. Some scholars called as Pashini Mudra. So you can see here some yogis, the upper above the capital of the pillars. These yogis have been carved, and this is a beautiful temple of Bhuleshwar. Then another important site is Brahmanatha temple at Parunde. It is an important site to the Nath Sampradaya, as this is a sacred place for them. Here we can see the temple of Brahmanath. The present temple is 100 to 200 years old, but there are 4 old pillars are situated. Based on the architecture of the temple or what has remained thereof, it can be dated to the 13th century. The octagonal brackets mainly bear different types of yogic asanas. There are around hundreds of tiny yogic postures that have been carved on the pillars. We can see some of the carvings here. So this is the temple. A modern structure is 200 years old, but inside the temple, within temple, there are 4 pillars. You can see here 1, 2, 3, and 4. These 4 pillars are very ancient, means dated back to 13th century. And here you can see the samadhi of Brahmanatha. So on this pillar, you can see some postures. You can see here. You will see the detail in next slides. So these are the postures you can see. Here we can see more sketches of the various yoga postures carved on the pillars of the temple. Some of the postures are identified, however, some are difficult to identify. Most of the asanas have been identified based on manuscripts of later period. The detailed description of the sites and postures are given in my one-off article as well as in my doctoral thesis. So you can see various postures of yogi. Some are not complicated postures, but some are, we can see here. See here, these small sketches of these asanas. Here you can see some complicated and difficult postures. This Pada Paschimottanasana, then Anantasana, then Gherandasana. We will see more images. So here we can see this is original sculpture and this is a sketch of that sculpture. So this is Prasarit Padottanasana. You can see some are not identified. It is very difficult to identify because nowhere we get the evidences or any references in text. So nomenclature, for the nomenclature, it is difficult to how to give names or how to call these asanas. And this is in future, this is the actually future study, and we in future more study can do any scholar, or I can also. Yeah. So this is Naukasana, and then this is Ardha Paschimottanasana. Then these are not unidentified asanas. Then this is Urdhva Dhanurasana, and this is looks like Gherandasana. You can see here Pad Paschimottanasana, and this is Ardha Machindrasana, Machindra's pose. You can see, and this is Anantasana, like Vishnu. You can see it like a Vishnu, and that's why this posture is called as Anantasana. Then this is unidentified asana. Here some more Urdhva Pavishta Konasana, then Garudasana. Here you can see the face of this yogi is shown as Garuda. You know, so you can see if you observe keenly, then you will find that face. And this is Kraunchasana, and this is unidentified, but it looks like Navasana. So another side is Mahuri Gate in Dabhoi, Vadodara district. So Dabhoi is situated 34 kilometers southeast of Vadodara. It has been a medieval fort town of Gujarat. The four magnificent gates of the fort are located in four directions. One of them is called Mahuri Gate. It is of the Vaghela period and has elaborate sculptural embellishments of rare yoga practices. In 2014, I have came across these rare postures of yoga practices. I have documented all the postures and given descriptions in my earlier research article on the Dabhoi. So here we can see this Dabhoi Gate, Mahuri Gate, and here in this portion, on this portion, you will observe the yogic postures. 84 siddhas have been carved in this gate, on the gate we can see. So some of the sketches made by me, you can see these different types of yogis. Some are in Navasana, then you can see Thunderbolt, and some stories are there also. Same condition is also here. Some asanas are still yet not identified, unidentified. Here you can see Navasana, then other asanas as well. So this projection earlier I have shown. So another asanas, you can say this Viparit Karni. It looks like Viparit Karni. This also. In next slide we will see here. So different types of asanas you can see here. Some more asanas. It actually it's 84 asanas are there. See, this posture resembles the shape of a boat, hence the name. The back side of the projection, first image is in Urdhva Mukha Paschimottanasana. Urdhva upwards and Mukha face, when used together, mean having the face upward. So you can see. Another yogi is depicted in some kind of posture. He has stretched his left leg straight upwards and has bent his right leg over the left leg. He has kept his right hand on the floor. So here, in this asana, both legs are so placed behind the back, the hands are folded in front of the chest, and the body is balanced on a small section of the seat near the tailbone. The pose is very similar to Ardha Garuda Bheda, Sthira Gudapada, Shirasana, and Arudha Garudasana. He is shown in Namaskar Mudra. Another yogi is shown in Lolasana or Tolasana. Raise the palms on the floor beside the hips. Exhale, raise the trunk and balance only on the hands, stretching out the arms. So this kind of posture you can see here, Dvipad Shirasana. It looks like Pashini Mudra as well. So now Kumbhakas. Hat Pratipika teaches 8 varieties of Kumbhakas. As per James Mallinson, Kumbhaka, the practice of breath control in Hatha Yoga has 3 sources: an ancient and not specifically yoga tradition of regulated breathing or pranayama that is thought to get rid of karma and physical impurity. Then another is yoga principle, a yoga principle that links the breath, the mind and semen by stopping one. The others are also stopped. And third, specific method of inhalation and exhalation known as kumbhakas, which work on both gross and the subtle bodies. So these are the kumbhakas, and we have some sculptural representations of this kumbhakas. You can see here 2 images showing Sitakari is depicted in the 12th century Changdeva temple at Sangdev in Jalgaon district of Maharashtra. The earliest mention of Sitkari is in Goraksha Shataka. In this, a sadhaka makes a whistling sound while inhaling through the mouth and exhaling through the nostrils. Shitali also, this is also similar to like Sitali also. Inhale through the rolled tongue and exhale through both nostrils. You can see here. You can see the close view of his face of yogis, and here. So these practices are going here, and you can see the conditions, also the sculptures. Now Surya means other mudras, kumbhakas. Surya, inhale through the solar or right nostrils, hold the breath, and then exhale through the lunar, or let the nostrils. Then Ujjayi, inhale through both nostrils while making a rasping sound with the palate, and epiglottis, hold the breath, and then exhale through the left nostrils. Bhastri, also same. These techniques are means we can't say that that yogi is doing Bhastri or Ujjayi, but some kind of Kumbhaka practices they are doing definitely. So you can see here, this is from Devlane in Nasik district, and this is from Ahmednagar. Then we'll see the mudras. According to the Hatha Pradipika, the purpose of mudras has always been to awaken Kundalini and make her rise up the central channel. These are the gestures, and the main purpose of these mudras is to preserve and raising of Bindu, that is semen, through mechanical means or the raising of the breath. So these are the mudras, 10 mudras I have shown here, and these are we have the representations of these mudras here. Jalandhar Bandha. You can see the pose of this yogi. It is from the Boi Mahuri gate. Place the chin on the chest. This is broken sculpture, but you can still see the face of this yogi. And Udyan Bandha, draw up the abdomen. You can see here. And there are also multiple images of the yogis touching their chin, representing the Jalandhar Bandha. At the Mahuri gate, the Boi, just in front of the sculptures of Gorakshanatha and Vinapa on the front wall, a yogi is shown with the stomach inside, which possibly might depict the Udyan Bandha. That means this. We have another images of this such kind of Jalandhar Bandha. Here also you can see yogi touches his chin to chest, and this is a sketch of this yogi. Another image, one of the best image of this mudra, we can say Mulabandha, or the yogi is probably shown sitting in triple lock: Udyana Bandha, Mulabandha, and Jalandhar Bandha. Mulabandha contract the perineum region, the two preceding techniques are often grouped as the three bandhas. They are to be practiced while holding the breath, and they are also sometimes prescribed without being named as adjuncts to other techniques such as Padmasana. One of the best image of a yogi doing his Loks Bandha is in the Vaishnava. This is Vaishnava, but inside the Garbhagriha, we can see the Shivlinga. So among scholars, there is some debate on this. Is it a Vaishnava or it is Mahadeva Shiva temple? But both images of Shaivas, Vaishnavas we can see on this in this temple. So this is from Anwa in Jalgaon, in Jalna district of Marathwada. So you can see this beautiful image here. Now, panels about Kanifnath and Yogini Bahuri are depicted at Palthan in Satara district, Panale Kaji in Ratnagiri district, Palasdev in Pune district, Dabhoi in Vadodara district, and Malshiras again in Pune district. It is not directly representing the method of Vajroli Mudra. Nevertheless, it depicts the legend when a yogini named Bahuri, probably in Vajroli Mudra, was defeating Kanifnatha. According to the legend in Lila Charitra, Kanifnatha went to the jungle of Yogini Bahuri and gave a challenge to her in sexual intercourse, probably practice of Vajroli Mudra. Both of them were involved in sexual practices and started to absorb semen, rajas of each other. Unfortunately, Bahuri, a worshipper of Kamakhya, acted treacherously and defeated Kanifnatha. This legend indicates the practice of Vajroli Mudra in the 13th century. So Amroli also, in Amroli, several depictions shows yogis inserting their phalluses in their mouth. It is probably indicating Amroli Mudra, in which a sadhaka drinks his or urine. There are several references to Amroli in Lila Charitra. So the yoga practitioner inverts himself or herself usually by assuming either a headstand or a shoulder stand. You can see some Viparit Karni postures representing representations of Viparit Karni. Here you can see the this posture, and this is included in mudra. Now, this is a very important and unique sculpture from Pimpri Dumala in Pune district. This Pimpri Dumala is 56 kilometers from Pune city, and you can see here the beautiful image of how yogi is awakening his kundalini. So in the Someshwara temple at Pimpri Dumala, this rare image, yogi is seated in Padmasana, on whose head is depicted a half-bloomed lotus. You can see lotus. And the lotus depicts the highest center Sahasrara Chakra, the 1,000-petal lotus in the head. In Nath Sampradaya, it is said that Shiva and Shakti reside in the body. In the lowest of the nerve centers lies Shakti in its dormant state. The yogi arouses it and makes it follow the middle nerve, the Sushumna, and unite with Shiva, who resides in the highest center, the Sahasrara. The 1,000-petal lotus in the head, the sculptor has probably tried to manifest these aspects in this image. The yogi is seated in Padmasana and probably with awakened Kundalini. And we know the Alandi is very famous pilgrimage center. There is Samadhi of Gyaneshwara. It is only 40 kilometers from this Pimpri Dumala. And we know that there is a description in Gyaneshwari, Bhavar Deepika. So you can see the how these yoga practices were prominent in during the that period, means from 11th century to 15th century. So I can conclude this PPTs and this presentation. The spread of Hatha Yoga and Kundalini practices are more prevalent in Western India during the 11th to 15th centuries. All this textual and archaeological evidence shows that the Hatha Yoga practices were more established in Western India, especially in Maharashtra. Now, I will pass this presentation on to Manish Maheshwari, who will talk about the problems related to history of yoga. Thank you.
Thank you, Vijayji, for this wonderful presentation. I think you can go ahead, and I will just say, next, so you can go to the next slide. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
Good evening to all. I would like to thank Kavi Kulaguru Kalidas Sanskrit University in association with Indic Academy for organizing this international webinar on yoga current trends and research. The topic of our title is Archaeology and History of Hatha Yoga, New Research and Challenges. Vijay Sardeji has already spoken about archaeology, and what you have seen is the latest research on the archaeology of yoga that represents about 10 years of his effort of going around in each and every temples of Maharashtra, getting the pictures taken, finding yoga sculptures and Natha imageries. So these are really cutting edge research in the field of yoga currently. What I will do is I will speak about the emergence of Hatha Yoga from the 12th century onwards. Next. So here are some facts. Vijay Sardeji has already mentioned a few of them. Hatha Yoga text starts to emerge only from the 12th century onwards. By Hatha Yoga, I mean complicated postures, bandhas, mudras, and complicated pranayamas. Before 12th century, we do not have any Hatha Yoga text. We do have texts, say Patanjali Yoga Sutras, but Patanjali Yoga Sutra, there is no mention of complicated asanas. You know, there are 14 asanas in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, but they are all sitting asanas, not comparable to the complicated asanas and the bandhas and the mudras that we see in the Hatha Yoga text from the 12th century onwards. We also have all the archaeological records of Hatha Yoga starts to emerge from the 12th century onwards, as Vijay Sardeji has shown. And now, to combine both these, both the text and the material evidence of Hatha Yoga emerges only and only in Western India, starting 11th, 12th century. If you look at other places during that time for archaeological or textual records, it's completely absent. Next. So these are the texts of Hatha Yoga, which were written in Maharashtra, which were composed and compiled in Maharashtra in Sanskrit between the 12th and 13th century. We have Dattatreya Yoga Shastra, Amrita Siddhi, Amaroga Prabodha, Goraksha Shataka, Vivek Martanda. So, for example, in Amrita Siddhi, it says that the text was composed in Deccan. Dattatreya Yoga Shastra, Goraksha Shataka, and Vivek Martanda combines the Vedantic metaphysics with the Natha Yoga tradition. And it is very similar to Gyaneshwari in its style and composition and in its content. So these texts are most likely also from Maharashtra. These are our earliest yoga texts that we have. Next, the earliest literature in Marathi, we find Hatha Yoga texts. The earliest literature of Marathi is about 13th century. We have Vivek Dharma. This is a Marathi text, and it's a dialogue between Goraksha and Amarnatha, which is also a Natha text. We find multiple Leelas in Leela Charitra on Hatha Yoga. Leela Charitra is a Mahanubhava text, which is a Krishnite sect, which was very popular in Maharashtra during the 13th and the 14th century. And much of the early literature of Maharashtra are by the Mahanubhavas. So in Leela Charitra, we find multiple Leelas, which talks of Hatha Yoga, which talks of complicated techniques of Hatha Yoga. Similarly, we find sections of Hatha Yoga in Gyaneshwari, which is the most popular text of Maharashtra. And we also have Hatha Yoga sections in Changdev Tattvasara. Tattvasara, Changdev Tattvasara is probably a Natha text from the 13th or the early 14th century. So all these texts, the earliest texts of Hatha Yoga, were composed in Maharashtra, either in Sanskrit or in Marathi. Next, please. Next. Okay, so we have discussed that the archaeological records as well as the textual records emerged from the 12th century in Maharashtra. But what about before 12th century or 11th century? Who were the people doing Hatha Yoga? Why did the Hatha Yoga text not available before that? So the only thing that I could find out before 12th century, our evidences are basically completely silent on Hatha Yoga tradition. We do have certain tapas postures. Tapas postures, this is from the Sachi. If you look at the bottom left corner, you would see some ascetics raising their hands in a tapas mudra. But these are postures for generating ascetic heat, controlling the mind. This is not Hatha Yoga, where the postures are used to raise Kundalini through the manipulation of prana. Though these tapas postures were integrated into Hatha Yoga text much later, say about 17th, 18th century. But we don't have any Hatha Yoga techniques pre-12th century. Next. This is what I could find. This is certain Brahmins meeting Alexander, and they are showing their ascetic techniques to Alexander. One of them stands on one leg, holding both his hands, as we have seen. And then if one of his legs get fatigued, he holds another of his hand, another of his leg, and they do it all day. But these are tapas practices again. I do not see any Hatha Yoga tradition in it about raising Kundalini, controlling the prana. So basically, to conclude that before 12th century, we do not get any evidences of Hatha Yoga practices, its complicated bandhas, mudras, complicated pranayamas. Even the pranayama that we find are very simple pranayama: breathe from the left, take from the right. You don't have complicated pranayama like Bhastrika or Ujjayi, all that. Next, please. So now the question emerges: why did the material and textual evidences of Hatha Yoga emerge only from the 12th century? And why Western India as the earliest place of its codification? Now, nobody has really done a lot of research on it. The researchers are still new. We have been trying to figure out what were the reasons that Hatha Yoga emerged into archaeological and our textual record during that time, at that period, at that place. I do have a few answers. Next, please. Now, to understand the rise of Hatha Yoga, there are two possible theories that we can say. The first theory is that the Hatha Yoga tradition was basically new. It is about 1,000 years old, and they were codified during the early 12th century. However, I think the Hatha Yoga techniques are very old, very, very old. We do have techniques of controlling prana in the Vedic text. We do have the central channel mentioned also in the Vedic text. However, in the Vedic text, there is no physical techniques to control the prana. Given that during the 12th century, there are so many yoga postures, so many bandhas that we see, the tradition has to be very old. It's for some reason, the tradition codified itself in around the 12th century. And what I'll do is I'll talk about some of the reasons why did the codification happen during that time when the practices are very old. Before we go there, we have to notice that all the practices related to Hatha Yoga comes from the Shiva tradition. The archaeological evidences are completely unanimous that it were the Shiva ascetics who were practicing these postures, these mudras, these bandhas. Now, to account for the rise of Hatha Yoga, we need to take into account the radical changes in religious practices during the early medieval period. Alexis Sanderson has masterfully shown that the predominance of Shaivism from the 5th to the 13th century in India, he calls that period 5th century to the 13th century as the Shaiva age. However, most of the kings called themselves Shaivas or Paramaheshwaras, the epigraphical and the archaeological records suggest that during the 5th to the 10th century, most of their patronage was given to the Vedic Brahmins. Example, in Maharashtra, the records of Rashtrakuta, who were ruling the Maharashtra region from 8th to 10th century, shows that most of their donation was to the Brahmin Agraharas. However, something changes radically post the collapse of the Rashtrakuta Empire. Post the collapse of the Rashtrakuta, the newly emerged kingdom, the Silharas and the Yadavas, provided massive patronage to the Shaiva tradition. Most of these kings were initiated by the Shaiva Rajagurus. From the 11th century onwards, we see the first construction of structural temples in Maharashtra. And along with structural temples, we see construction of large monasteries on the perimeter of the temples. In Maharashtra, we do find certain temple construction activities during the Vatakata period, 4th century, 5th century. But after that, we do not see any structural temples. We do see caves, but no structural temples. The Rashtrakuta might have built structural temples, but they might have been in bricks, so we don't have any evidences for it. But the spree of construction of Shaiva temples and monasteries from 11th to 13th century is staggering. We have about 90% of the epigraphic record of Maharashtra are from the 11th and the 13th century. And most of them, about 60% to 70% of these records suggest that all the patronages were given to the Shaiva ascetics. So what we find is that during 11th, 12th century, Shaiva asceticism was institutionalized by the patronage of the royal dynasties. And it is during this time that we notice the rise of yoga texts and also the massive iconographical program of Hatha Yoga in the temples constructed during that period. To recap, before the 11th century, the Shaiva ascetics did not have any institution or structures. I mean, they might have been practicing Hatha Yoga techniques and all that, but since there was no monasteries or large temples, the codification would not have happened. Once they started receiving patronage from the Yadavas, the codification of all the Hatha techniques started to emerge. And also one of the things we have to keep in mind is the rise of Shaiva Rajagurus, of this divine being, this charismatic figure, who leads the tradition. So for example, we have Gorakshanatha, who is the founder of the Natha tradition. I mean, we do have evidences of Rajagurus in the 7th and the 8th century, Shaiva Rajagurus, but it's only from the 10th, 11th centuries that this divine charismatic figure of Shaivacharya emerges. And I think this is also one of the reasons that Natha tradition emerges during that time, 12th century, under the patronage of Gorakshanatha in Maharashtra. Next. Anyways, so now we have discussed why 12th century because of Shaiva institutionalization, but why Western India? The Shaiva institutionalization was happening also in Madhya Pradesh or Karnataka under the Kalamukhas or the Shaiva Siddhanta saints, or under the Chauhans, the Pashupatas. But why Maharashtra? My answer is, or our answers is basically that it is likely that the Natha tradition originated in Western India, most likely in Maharashtra, and the Gorakshanatha tradition, along with their forerunners, were the most advanced practitioners of Hatha Yoga techniques. As Vijay Sardeji has shown, most of the places where you find Hatha Yoga techniques are related to Nathas. I have been reading a Marathi text with Vijay Sardeji, and we find that there is an episode in Leela Charitra where the householder yogis, on seeing Santosh, who is a yogi, performing strange asanas, the yogis call him a veritable Goraksha, a Shakshat Goraksha. So basically, which shows that in the 12th century Maharashtra, Hatha Yoga, the physical forms of practices, were associated with the Gorakshanatha tradition. So here we have it. We have emergence of the Natha tradition, who were the pioneers of the Hatha Yoga techniques, and they were patronized by the Yadavas, and based on patronization and the codification, during the 12th and the 13th century Maharashtra, we find the emergence of Hatha Yoga techniques in Western India first, and then after a couple of 100 years, we find the archaeological records and the textual records in South India and Eastern India and Nepal. But the first emergence is basically around 12th century in Maharashtra. Next, please. So now we'll I'll just quickly wrap up and say a few things. Hatha Yoga is still in its infancy. We still have large number of texts that has not been read, that has not been translated, that has not been critically edited. Say, for example, we don't, one of the earliest Hatha Yoga text is in Marathi, Vivek Dharma, which is a Natha Yoga text. We need to have a translation of this for the wider yoga community. If anybody who is listening to this talk and who knows Marathi well and would like to undertake a translation projects, we'll be happy to collaborate and take things forward. We also have large number of medieval Kannada and Telugu work related to Shaivism. And I think these texts, again, have not been mined for Hatha Yoga practices. We need to read these texts, to figure out the tradition of Hatha Yoga, especially in the Karnataka and the Andhra region. We also have epigraphical records. We need epigraphical records, especially in the Karnataka and the Tamil Nadu region, to see if there are any evidences of Hatha Yoga in it. So these are all non-Sanskrit texts, and in the Sanskrit texts, there are vast number of texts, especially from the 16th to the 19th century, which requires scholars to come forward and undertake the analysis and critical edition. I think two texts that we really need that can advance our knowledge of Hatha Yoga is Hatha Sanketa Chandrika and Tattva Bindu Yoga. These are 17th, 18th century texts. And there are multiple other texts. If you look at the Catalogus Categorum, there are so many texts with the Hatha entry in it. We need scholars to come forward and take this challenge. We also have to survey the Puranic literature of the pre-medieval period, of the medieval period. Say, for example, in the Pampa Mahatmyam, we have large descriptions, a lot of descriptions of yogis in different postures, in different bandhas and techniques. So Pampa Mahatmya is a Mahatmya of the Pampa region, which is basically the Vijayanagar Empire, the Hampi region. And it shows that in the 15th, 16th century Hampi region, there were a large number of Natha yogis and other ascetics practicing Hatha Yoga in that region. Then, of course, archaeology. Vijay Sardeji has done phenomenal work in the Maharashtra temples. I think this work needs to be extended to other temples of different eras. I can think of Karnataka temples, the Kalamukha temples, which needs to be mined for any Hatha Yoga techniques that is available to us. Next, please. I think with this, I think we are running out of time. We have about 5-7 minutes. We will take any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So if there are any questions, yeah, we have a question from Anjor Dikshit. Please, Anjor, you can ask a question.
Yeah, is my voice audible?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Vijayji and Manishji, for the wonderful session and extensive research that you, all the researchers are doing. My question is concerning two points which somehow connect. First one is, like you said, it has been, you believe that the Hatha Yoga tradition is very old tradition, but there are not enough evidences which probably are not researched yet and need that. So is there a possibility like there would be a lot of things that are lost in due to invasions or due to rulers or the way India was attacked first? And second, like Vijayji showed the images and all, while the researchers go and search for all these evidences, how do you manage to make sense out of those which are damaged, like the murti that is damaged or probably the sculpture that is damaged? So these are my two connecting questions.
So, Vijayji, you can take the second question about the damaged murtis. I can take the first question.
So there is possibility actually some sculptures might be demolished or that कि कुछ ऐसे स्कल्पचर हो सकते हैं कि जो इन्वेडर्स द्वारा तोड़े गए होंगे. This there is possibility, but you can see another that बख्तियार खिलजी ने जो नालंदा जो यूनिवर्सिटी को जलाया था, वहां पे जो लाइब्रेरी थी, वहां पर भी मुझे पॉसिबिलिटी है कि बिकॉज इट वाज इन दैट एविडेंस इन इट्स फ्रॉम 12th-13th century. सो उसमें बहुत सारे टेक्स्ट जो योगा रिलेटेड होंगे या बहुत सारा कुछ खजाना हो सकता है, वो शायद डिस्ट्रॉय हुआ होगा. तो इस डिस्ट्रक्शन के आफ्टर दिस डिस्ट्रक्शन आल्सो we can manage to recognize, identify particular sculptures, because while seeing this, while observing this, we can see the which type of temple is there, which god is there, and what other sculptures are saying. They are giving some indications. वहां पे कुछ अलग और भी योगा लाइक पोस्चर्स हो सकते हैं, तो उनको हम देखकर पता कर सकते हैं कि other sculptures are also from related to yoga, but some sculptures are very difficult to identify.
So yeah, so but there might be a lot of damage and there might be a lot of destruction and a lot of wear and tear, that's for sure. But whatever is available to us suggests that Maharashtra, Western India is the region where all these techniques and practices were codified. We cannot comment on how and what was the extent of destruction. We are just dealing with whatever we have with us at this point of time.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to ask one more thing. Like you said, people who are interested in translations and all can connect with you. So what would be that procedure for that, or like how do we?
Send me an email. Send us an email. I can just type my mail here. We need people to undertake a translation of these early Marathi texts.
Okay, thank you so much.
Jairamanji is
Namaste, Manishji and Vijay Sardeji. This is Jairaman. It was fascinating to listen to your wonderful presentation. My specific question is, yes, there is a lot of scope for work in systematically documenting and understanding the origins of Hatha Yoga. But everyone is aware that there is a particular Hatha Yoga project going on in the European centers of yoga research, and they are setting a particular narrative about the origins of Hatha. So what is the kind of narrative that is being set? And in these researchers based on archaeology, what could be the hypothesis that we can present? A general overview of this and an orientation or a hint on this will help researchers to understand the narrative being set and the response, the direction or the orientation to the response that is required. It will be helpful.
So I will take this question. So yeah, we know about the Hatha Yoga project, the famous Hatha Yoga project, and they are in the process of bringing out a lot of critical editions of these early texts that I've spoken of. However, in their Hatha Yoga project, they have mostly only focused on the textual evidences so far. They have not focused, as far as I know, and I think Vijay Sardeji would also agree to it, that they have not focused on the archaeological evidences. So based on that, they have come up with these ideas about the Buddhist origins of Hatha Yoga and the origins of Hatha Yoga in Tantric Buddhist environment and all that. But just look at the vast evidences that we have presented based on archaeology and based on these early Marathi texts. So all the Hatha Yoga project have not worked on Marathi texts. Nobody in the Hatha Yoga project know about Marathi literature. So if they will read what Vijay Sardeji has presented in Marathi text or what I have spoken about it, that might change whatever their intuitions are or whatever they have tried to show about the origins. Because without an understanding of early Marathi literature and archaeology, I think no study of yoga can be completed, Hatha Yoga specifically.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful, sir. If there are any other questions, kindly raise your hand or put it in the chat box. And indeed, it is a very less trodden path that archaeology and history of any subject concerned is very less taken by the students. And that too related to yoga specifically is a very rare context. And we are really happy that there are two speakers, not one, speaking on such rare topics. And it will definitely encourage and inspire our research students, because every time in philosophical research, we don't see this part of, we don't try to dwell this part of history and archaeology. So that is one less trodden path, and many of the research scholars, I wish that they would get inspired by this and start working in this direction. So I think there are no more questions. So I really thank Manish Maheshwariji and Vijay Sardeji for giving us wonderful insights. And with this, we'll be concluding this session. And tomorrow we have the concluding valedictory session, and we'll be having Dr. Nagaraj Patuiji, who will be speaking on Swara Yoga. That is the last lecture, and that is the keynote address also at the same time. So tomorrow is the valedictory session, which will be presided over by Professor Madhusudan Penna, Vice Chancellor of Kavikulu Guru Kalidas Sanskrit University. So, so thank you one and all for participating, and we'll be concluding this with the recital of Shanti Mantra. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, Sarve Santu Niramayah, Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu, Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you.